JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a franchise that hosts a multitude of interesting and positive traits, but I find that the most interesting aspect of the series is its longevity. Author Hirohiko Araki has been writing this manga ever since 1987, starting out in the weekly Shonen Jump magazine before making its way over to the monthly Ultra Jump in 2004. You would think that by 30 years into its publication, the property may have become stale or repetitive like so many of the other large shows and stories that have graced the pages of magazines or the screens of a TV or theater, but you would be wrong. JoJo still has a strong fan base behind both the manga and recent anime adaptation who are all constantly coming back for more. Why is that? Some may say that it's the compelling characters, the creative stance, and fun set pieces, which is all true by the way, but I think one of the main reasons behind this popularity over all these years is its story structure, and Araki's willingness to change and let go. The story of JoJo's is not a story about one select character or a select group of characters, rather it's about a family tree. A rather messed up family tree, but a family tree nonetheless. Part 1, Phantom Blood, follows gentleman Jonathan Joestar as he fights his evil stepbrother turned vampire Dio with breathing magic called Hamon that allows this man to punch a rock through a frog. The arc spans the first 5 volumes of the manga and the first 9 episodes of the anime before Jonathan tragically dies in a ship that sinks at sea to save his newlywed wife while embracing the severed, sentient head of Dio. Normally, a series would end once they kill off their main character, but if you watch or read JoJo's, you would quickly realize that this isn't your normal series. Instead, the story picks up 49 years later in Part 2, Battle Tendencies, with a new main character, Joseph Joestar, the grandson of Jonathan. Joseph is a different character than Jonathan. Jonathan was a reactionary character, and though simple, had an innocent sweetness to him. Where Jonathan was the shining example of a gentleman, Joseph is loud, brash, and cocky. He seems to never take anything seriously, and while Jonathan was purely an external character who acted rather than thought, his grandson schemed, winning his fights not through strength, but through strategy and outwitting his opponents. Joseph is left to gather a posse like his grandfather to combat a new evil, the ancient Pillarmen, who feed on vampires in a similar way to how vampires of Part 1 fed on humans. From this point onwards, every new story arc will star a new JoJo. From the quiet and genuinely rude individual, Jotaro Kujo, the bombastic and fun-loving Josuke Higashikata, and the reserved and strong-willed Giorno Giovanna. Once a character arc is completed, Araki moves on to the next, allowing his leads to shine but never overstay their welcome. Each part has drastically different leads, drastically different themes, and drastically different settings, and this is what I think allows JoJo to continue to stay new and fresh even to this day. Each subsequent part can be seen as a sequel to the last. Generally, it continues to tell a narrative in the same universe as its last part, even though the prior arc had a conclusion to its story. One of the things that differs JoJo parts from other sequels is that it avoids issues that derive from continuing a completed story. A huge problem with the average sequel is that it has to give the characters a solid reason to continue to interact with each other or adventure together after the main conflict has all but wrapped up. I want you to imagine a sequel to the Pixar movie Up for a moment. What reason would you give to have the characters return for another adventure? Well, there should be no reason, or not a good one at least. Their character arcs are completed and thus have no reason to return for another movie. Their lessons have been learned and their stories drawn to a close. I think another Pixar movie, Cars 2, is a perfect example of this. What reason is there to have these characters go on another adventure? There isn't one, so the movie has to invent new scenarios to get the characters back on screen. Unfortunately, the reason provided isn't exactly compelling or reasonable within the universe of the movie, and the film suffers for it. This isn't to say that creating a sequel is impossible, rather it can be difficult to do so. Star Wars was originally planned as a standalone film, but was able to give the audience a compelling reason to have these characters continue to fight the Empire and character arcs to boot. Again, not impossible, but can be difficult depending on the story that you're trying to make a sequel to. There are, of course, ways to get around this. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, has its story conclude with their heroes getting separated on their quest to bring the One Ring to Mordor. The story has a satisfying enough conclusion, yet leaves itself open to a sequel. The story wasn't finished and warrants another installment in the franchise, but even then, it isn't so much an entirely new story, but rather the next part in an already existing one. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is able to completely sidestep this problem in a different way than Lord of the Rings by changing leads and characters every part. While some characters do return from earlier parts, the majority of the cast is often made up of new characters, with new personalities, new powers, and most importantly, new character arcs. Jojo doesn't need to come up with a new superficial reason to put old characters into new arcs or conflicts. Rather, Araki decides to create new characters and arcs designed for each new character. Why have Josuke, a teenager living in a small town called Morio in Japan, become the leader of an Italian mafia in Naples, when instead you could have half Japanese, half Italian teenager Giorno become the head of an Italian mafia in Naples? Another issue that can arise in long-running franchises is that the story is retreading common ground or becoming repetitive. There's only so many times you could have a story revolve around a certain theme or a certain tone in a franchise before it becomes stale. Say you really like spaghetti, and you eat spaghetti for every meal. Maybe about a weekend you're like, I don't want spaghetti no more, I'm tired of it, spaghetti that out of my face! Once again, the generational focus of Jojo allows for the franchise to avoid this problem by easily changing its tone and even its genre. Most long-running franchises can only alter genre or tone so many times. Dragon Ball was originally a lighthearted story about adventure before shifting to become Dragon Ball Z, a story that primarily focused on action and bloody fights. But would that series be able to shift back to its original tone if it wanted to? The release and reception of Dragon Ball GT seems to say no, as ratings of the show dropped, as while the show was still Dragon Ball at its very core, the shift in tone was unnatural and did not make sense in the context of the series. Because each new part of JoJo's is almost essentially a blank slate, the series can make this shift in tone and genre seamlessly. Phantom Blood and Battle Tendencies focus on characters fighting the main villain of their parts, while Stardust Crusaders shifted focus to a story about traveling the world and a Monster of the Week format. Stardust Crusaders to Diamonds Unbreakable is an even larger shift, as JoJo's goes from a serious show about action to a more lighthearted slice-of-life murder mystery. Then the tone once again gains a serious edge, as JoJo's then becomes a mafia story in the heart of Italy. This allows for the story of JoJo's to stay fresh and for each part to feel unique from each other. Think of JoJo's as Italian food as a whole and each part as a different dish. You have the baked ziti, you have the risotto, you have the pizza. And while dishes can have similar flavors, they are fundamentally different in some way or form. As you watch or read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you will never feel like the current part was something that you've already consumed. Araki is given flexibility in the story he wants to tell and is almost never tied down to a specific tone or genre. This leads to each part of JoJo's to have a unique and fresh feel to them, even after decades of publication, and I think this style of storytelling can lead to a successful long-running series. And it's not like this is only something in JoJo's. I think this could be seen in the wild success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. While different, it has a lot of similarities with JoJo's when it comes to story structure. Different movies have different themes and different tones with different leads. To say that Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain America: The Winter Soldier have the same tone, themes, or even genre would be insane, and the ability to create fresh and new experiences in the same universe has led to this decade-long project to become one of the highest-grossing film franchises of all time. Now, your next line will be Kimada. Variety alone doesn't make a successful series. You need good characters, plot, and writing. And this is true, but I think this story structure has helped JoJo's become the timeless juggernaut of manga that it is, as Araki is able to easily avoid a lot of problems that are inherent to long-running franchises. Even as the manga is in its 8th arc and the anime has recently finished its 5th, I find myself excited to see where the series goes next, and I'm eager to see how this story will continue.